thanks everyone for being here today. I don't know about you, but I was bludgeoned to death with about 561 emails about this breakfast over the last couple of weeks. I was petrified no one was going to show up. I thought you kept emailing because no one was actually signing up to be here. So it's a huge relief to see people here. Thanks for making the time. There are a few friends and former colleagues of mine that aren't here today that texted me this morning that they couldn't make it here because of the rain. I won't be naming names, but I will be shame tweeting them right after this. So if you follow me at @TheDonLane and join the tens of followers that I have in my social media universe, you'll find. Also want to thank Kathy for inviting me here. You mentioned it already, but I did have a long run at Arnold, and it was a pretty good run. It started inauspiciously. I was the account coordinator on the Stop and Shop account, which was not the biggest account at the agency at the time. Great local brand, but not really what I was looking for at the time. But the one great thing about that opportunity is that we had a hot shit creative director on Stop and Shop by the name of Kathy Kiley. And you remember those people from early days and how much they helped shape who you are. And so I appreciate everything you did for me then and having me here today. And then also, just want to thank my team for being here. A lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about today, we did together, and I want to thank them for all the hard work that they've done, and we're just getting started. So enough pleasantries. We'll get going on this. We'll talk about fantasy football. It's a very important industry. Let's go back for a second. Let me tell you a little bit about who DraftKings is, because it's been in the news quite a bit over the course of the last few years, as we know. Hard to believe, but it wasn't founded until 2012, just 5 years ago. And it was started by three guys. They worked at Vistaprint, and I'll come back around to the relevance of that in a second. But they were smart, hardworking guys and opportunistic, and they noticed that there was a loophole that created an opportunity for this business. And so in the United States, betting on sports, unless you're in Nevada or New Jersey, unregulated, is illegal. But playing fantasy sports for money is legal, because betting on sports is a game of chance. Playing fantasy is a game of skill. I won't bore you with all the details. It's true, it's legal, and we're active in 41 states. They identified this opportunity, and they started pretty modestly in May of 2012 with a tiny contest. Over time, because of their background at Vistaprint, they were performance marketing experts. They knew how to acquire customers, and the more customers they acquired, the bigger the prize pools became. And it just became this domino effect where the business started to grow, and it grew really fast. Within 2.5 years, they had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. By the beginning of 2015, they literally had hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. They were going at a valuation of over $1 billion. Investors like Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots, Jerry Jones, owner of the Dallas Cowboys, huge media companies like ESPN and Fox were putting hundreds of millions of dollars into it. And that money was invested because they saw an opportunity too. But they invested the money because they wanted DraftKings to grow its user base and acquire customers. And so if you didn't see DraftKings or FanDuel advertising in August and September of 2015, you probably should have checked your pulse, because you could not go literally more than 10, 15 minutes without seeing a commercial if you were watching television at the time. I mean, literally, they spent over $200 million in a 6 to 8 week span during that time period. And this is what it looked like.
This is the fantasy football season that could change it all. DraftKings.com is the one-week fantasy football destination where real people win life-changing amounts of cash every week. It's simple. Just pick your sport, pick your players, and pick up your cash. Get free entry with promo code DEAL in our $10 million Millionaire Maker event this Sunday. Winner gets $2 million. Welcome to the big time. Get to DraftKings.com.
So I'm not going to comment on the creative excellence of the advertising that took place a couple of years ago, but this had all the tried and true elements of direct response marketing. It did acquire a lot of customers, but it also let down a lot of customers because it was overpromising an experience that you could win up to $1 million. It turned off sports fans because it portrayed sports fans in a way that a lot of sports fans didn't see themselves. It turned off a lot of fantasy players, season-long fantasy players who didn't play daily fantasy sports, and we'll get into the distinction in a minute, because they said, that's not the fantasy that I know. So the barrage of advertising did collect a lot of people who were let down. It was hard to create strong lifetime value out of those customers because they came and played, didn't win, it was a false promise, and they left. But for sports fans in general and fantasy sports fans, they looked at that and they said, that's not who I am. That's not a brand for someone like me. And so as fast as DraftKings grew, it started to plateau. Not only for that, that's a minor reason. There were a couple other major reasons. A DraftKings employee won a significant contest on FanDuel, and that created allegations of impropriety. Turns out everything he did was above board. Independent investigation found that, but it created a narrative in the press about what's going on over there. It also caught the attention of regulators and attorneys general around the United States who said, wait a second, this is a loophole. Is this good for customers? Are they being protected? And is there some skin in the game that we can have? And what transpired was people like Eric Schneiderman, who's the Attorney General down in New York, worked to shut down DraftKings and FanDuel. And we were shut down in our #1 market for a period of several months at the end of 2015. So beginning of 2015, tiny company, hundreds of millions of dollars, the biggest advertising blitz in history. Within 5 weeks after that advertising launched, stuff like this started to happen. So it was a pretty big challenge through 2016. And the challenge that DraftKings faced was, how does a startup, the fastest growing, hottest startup in the country, that's been shut down in its #1 market, return to growth? And that's about the time that they started to recruit me. And I looked at it kind of like, gee, what's going on over there? But I felt like it was a huge opportunity for a brand and a product, a great product, and a great experience if you do play season-long fantasy sports, that just needed to wrap a brand around its messaging to start to define who it was at its best, to attract the right kind of people and offer an experience that they could have a great time with as a sports fan. And so we have this notion called building brand demand that's just driving everything that we do. And we're a performance marketing company, and what we like to say as change agents within the company is that you don't do brand marketing to replace acquisition or retention. You don't do it instead of it, you don't do it on top of it. You do brand marketing because you believe it's going to fuel acquisition and retention. And we're starting to make some inroads, and our marketing is beginning to change, and we'll show you some examples of that. But as we thought about, well, what does brand demand mean for us, we looked to other brands for inspiration, to think about what do the best brands in the world do. And if you guys remember records, those round things that you used to play, your record collection, when I was growing up, said a lot about who you were as a person. And then around 2002, when iTunes came out, your iTunes playlist said a lot about who you were as a person. I could look at your iTunes playlist and figure out who you were, or at least get judgy about it. Today, I would argue that the front of your iPhone says a lot about who you are. So our goal is to be front of iPhone worthy. We want to be a daily fantasy sports site that's part of the daily dose of information that you can't live without. And so these are two icons that live on the front of my phone, and I was starting to think about why are they there? Why are they on the front page and not buried in a folder or on another screen? And I started to think about it and recognize that Nike sells shoes. They make shoes, but they sell a lifestyle. And Starbucks makes coffee, but they sell an experience. And if you think about it, when you go to Starbucks, it's great furniture, it's a wonderful ambiance, good music, maybe you see a friend, maybe you're doing work by yourself, maybe you have a meeting. Oh, by the way, while you're there, you have a cup of coffee. And if you've read Howard Schultz's biography, he talks about his mission is to create a home away from home. That's what Starbucks is all about for him. He's created an experience or a club that his biggest fans want to be part of. And that's why those people choose Starbucks over other experiences. Nike's another one. If you run with the Nike Plus app, which is what this is, you may know that at the end of a workout, a voice will come on, and it will be a famous Nike athlete or maybe one of their trainers who will comment on your activity. Hey, where have you been the last 5 days? Or good to see you 3 days in a row. Or you just set your personal best in the 5K. And it's a fun little gesture that you get at the end of the workout. So a few days ago, running, at the end, finished, and the voice came on and said, hey, you've been out there for 3 days in a row. While your friends are back home dreaming, you're out there doing it. And I smiled to myself and I walked. I love that little thing. I'm a sucker for brands. And then I thought, wait a second. Your friends are dreaming. You're doing. Just do it. And so everything that they do, from the gigantic TV spots to the in-store displays, to the emails, to little gestures like that, define who they are, they live the brand, and they create a club that maybe you want to be a part of. Whether you know it or not, you're choosing to affiliate with a brand like that. What they've recognized is that marketing isn't just about conversion. Marketing, there's been a shift towards subscription. Subscribing to a brand, subscribing to something that's bigger than the product itself. So we started to think about our place in the world. And if you're a sports fan, there's been the ongoing barroom conversation about what's the fifth major sport in America. These are the big four. There's been conversation over the years as to what's the fifth major sport. Is it NASCAR? Is Tiger Woods or his followers, are they going to make golf the fifth major sport? When is soccer finally going to break through? And an interesting thing has happened while this conversation and this argument has been taking place. There is a fifth major sport out there, and it's called fantasy sports. There's over 50 million people that play fantasy sports. And for many of those people, if not most of those people, their favorite team is their team, and their favorite league is their league. And there's something to build on with that. You might even say that fantasy sports is the new national pastime. So we felt like there was an opportunity there, and we tried to shoot high and think about creating a category of one for DraftKings. And what we mean by that, just to give you a couple of examples, if I was to ask out there, someone's going to have to raise their hand, or I'll call on one of the DraftKings people in front. What's the fastest growing real estate hospitality company in the world? Who said that? Airbnb, winner. How much real estate do they own? None. Fastest growing transportation company, Uber, no cars. And the fastest growing, biggest, most gargantuan content provider in the history of the universe is Facebook, who makes 0 original content. And there's something there. And what they do is they create a frictionless layer between what their fans want by making it simple, by making it better, and by putting their followers, their customers, their fans at the center of everything that they do. And so we said, what could we learn from that? Let's go to the source. Let's talk to our fans, people who do play, people who don't play. And we conducted a pretty exhaustive brand research study at the beginning of this year. Worked with Arnold's business strategy group on that. They did a great job. We surveyed over 2,500 sports fans, and the goal was to identify, what's the health of our brand, what are the equities associated with the brand, and what are the drivers and the barriers that we confront in order to grow our business. Little context. The green represents people who play fantasy sports in general. There's over 50 million people, as I mentioned earlier, that play fantasy sports. The 3 are the active people who play daily fantasy sports. So season-long fantasy sports, for those, the uninitiated, are like the typical fantasy football league. You draft your team in August. It's the best day of the year for the league. It's the most fun. For most people, it's downhill from there. You have your team for the whole year, and unless you make trades, which nobody has time to do, that's who you're locked in with. Daily fantasy sports gives you an opportunity, in the case of football, to set a new lineup every week. And so there's a distinction between the two. For baseball and other sports, you can literally play fantasy sports every day. So there's a massive growth opportunity there. There's 50+ million people who do play fantasy sports who don't play daily fantasy. So we looked to find out, what are the reasons why? An alarming thing was that of those people who have never played our game before, but do play other fantasy sports, only 16% of them are considering our product. So we dug into why. I'm not going to go through too many charts. There's not too much on here, but you can follow along. What we did was we identified what were the things that attracted season-long and daily fantasy players to fantasy sports, and what were they looking for out of a great experience. And they were looking for things like a fun game to play. That's obvious. One thing that was enlightening is they were looking for an easy game to play. They saw their typical fantasy experience as easy, and their impression of daily fantasy sports was that it was too difficult. They were looking for the ability to play against friends. They wanted to play against people of the same skill level. They didn't want to go play against those people that had been written about that were professional daily fantasy players because they felt like they had no chance to win. They wanted to be able to play head-to-head against their friends. They wanted to play, what else did they want to play? Someone on my team, I forget. They wanted an easier and faster drafting process. And what was interesting was that DFS players and season-long players were looking for the same things. But when you looked at people who had played DFS before, they not only gave us credit for offering those, they saw us as having an advantage over the competitive set. But when you talk to people who had played season-long sports, they were looking for the same things, but they said we were at a deficit. They thought that you couldn't play against friends. They thought you couldn't play against people of the same skill level. They didn't think it was an easy game to play. Now, an enlightening thing was where the D was up in the upper right-hand corner before, over half of the DFS players also play season-long. So season-long players who had played our product knew what we had to offer and believed that we were a leader in the category. Season-long players who hadn't played our product didn't know. Why? Because we had that advertising that I showed you at the beginning, which was just too much. It overpromised. So we realized that we had to take our product out of the black box, enlighten people about everything that we had to offer, show how we had grown as a company over the course of the last year, the new product development that we had, and just take the cloak off it and say, here's who we are at our best, and invite people to come in and play our game. So starting to think about the things that we would emphasize, one was it's easy and fun to play. All the different ways that you can play. You can set a league and play against your friends. You can play against your friends head-to-head, etc. But really what we wanted to do was show how playing fantasy sports to sports fans who had never played fantasy, or playing daily for season-long who had never played daily, made being a sports fan better. And portray our product and portray our target in a way that proved that we were a brand for someone like them, that we understood who they are and the place that we played in their lives. So our mission, this is what we sell, is that we make sports better by bringing fans closer to the games they love. And our positioning, which we launched just earlier this year, but really in earnest with NFL just a couple weeks ago, is the game inside the game. And so, you know, we make a fantasy product, but we sell bringing fans closer to the games they love. And what game inside the game means is literally it's on your phone, it's the game you're playing inside the game that you're watching. But there's a little nuance on there for sports fans, and this speaks to the game of skill that we try to offer. If you play golf, most people play from tee to green. John Cooney and Bill McMullen and other people in this room who are excellent golfers play from green to tee. They play the game backwards. It's a game of skill for them, and that's why they usually win all the money. If you play baseball or you follow baseball, the manager at the end of a baseball game will put the first baseman and the third baseman closer to the foul lines because they want to guard the lines and not allow a double down the line to gift scoring position to the opponent in a close game. They're more willing to give a single in the hole. That's the game inside the game. And so by being an authentic sports brand and using nomenclature like that and showing how the better sports fans understand the nuances of the game, that's how we communicate that it's a game of skill, and that's how we start to resonate with sports fans. I don't know how that got in there. I know what you guys are thinking. Gronk's much smaller than you thought he was. We like to say that what we do is just as important, if not more important, than what we say. We can have a big tagline, the game inside the game, and we can have tons of advertising that promises a great experience. But it's the experiences that we provide for our fans that literally bring them closer that we're trying to shine a light on. So this took place a couple weeks ago at something called Fantasy Sports Fest at Gillette Stadium. And we invited fantasy players to come to Gillette. They had ESPN and other media outlet fantasy experts coaching them up on how to prepare for their fantasy season. And then we had the opportunity to invite them onto the field to kick field goals, to run patterns, to make tackles, to throw touchdown passes. And I can tell you, if you're a Pats fan or a football fan, if you're on the turf at Gillette and you see the stadium around you and you're having a catch with a family member or a friend, it's a pretty special experience that the Patriots don't offer, that the leagues don't offer, that fans want, that someone should. And if we're the brand that's bringing fans closer to the games they love, It's not just about taking your money into our contest, it's giving you experiences that make sports better. They had a chance to meet Rob Gronkowski too. So after I talked to Xerox for about 45 minutes, he had a couple minutes to spend with the rest of the hundreds of people that were there. So that brings us to NFL 2017. One of the things that this research uncovered for us, we did all the quant research, but we did qualitative research too, and it didn't take long to figure out that there were two kinds of sports fans in the world. There are people that like to sit back and watch and be entertained, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're good people, they're great sports fans. There's another kind of sports fan who likes to lean in and participate. Those are people that play fantasy sports. And if you've ever done it, you realize how much fun it is because you literally and figuratively are invested in the game. It makes the game more fun to watch, you're more invested in it, and it's just a better experience. And so what we wanted to do was bring this to life. And so the territory that we are trying to own or trying to establish a presence in is this idea of play. I started to think about some of the great taglines or positionings that live out in the world. And I was thinking about Heineken. Heineken, open. That is a point of view. They're Dutch, open-minded. But it's also a call to action when you think about it. Open that can of beer. Think different is a point of view. It's a call to action. Drivers Wanted was a point of view, was also a call to action. And we started to think about, we live in this world, we're all overworked, God knows what's going on down in Washington, D.C. It's really stressful out there. It's time to take time out and play. And if we could establish ourselves in that territory, we could show how we're relevant in people's lives, but also have a call to action that isn't bludgeoning them with promo codes, which we still have, but is more invitational to say, come in and play, try our game. The other thing I want to mention about it is, in terms of bringing fans closer to the game, what we wanted to do was literally, with some of our creative, put fans on the field in the middle of the play. So we shot this campaign at a football stadium in British Columbia. It was over the summer. We couldn't shoot in the United States because all the NFL teams were in training camp. And we took a couple nights. We shot tons of footage. We put cameras in the middle of the play. We had professional football players, professional coaches designing plays, and in this case, the cameraman was literally maybe 3-4 feet away from this action. So this is a running back trying to dive over the line of scrimmage, or the goal line, and a linebacker catching him in mid-flight. They landed literally almost on top of this photographer. And what we wanted to do was, with our marketing, put fans on the field and bring that to life. And here's one example of what it looked like. So we shot that, and the goal was bring fans closer to the game, act like a leading sports fan. And the agency that made that was Deutsch. Both their LA and New York offices worked on it. And when they came and presented the idea, the creative director said, we wanted to think about, if no one had invented fantasy football, but Nike had come up with the idea, how would Nike launch it? And we thought that was just a really interesting way of thinking about pivoting our brand away from, is it legal, is it for me, to that's an aspirational brand that understands who I am and puts me closer to the games I love. We carved all that footage up into a million different executions. Please, I know I'm just showing you TV commercials today. Don't get judgy about that. We've got digital first, social first, out of home, every possible channel, experiential stuff that comes to life. It's just boring to look at on slides in a big room. But it's all designed to educate about our product and to sell our games. And we wanted it to be flexible as well. So we won't show you all of these, but we have different executions that start to highlight all the great things about our product. The contest in the lower left is just a piece of what we have to offer. It's an important piece, and we do use that to drive acquisition and to establish our presence as the leader in playing fantasy sports for money. But there's so many other stories to tell that this campaign was designed to deliver on. One of the things it was designed to deliver on was to market in real time. And so we have this initiative called Marketing at the Speed of Sports. We have a great social program that our social team runs on a day-to-day basis that has us involved in sports culture, in the day-to-day sports water cooler conversation, entertaining fans and being there as a resource for information that teach them how to play and get the most out of their DraftKings experience too. But what we also wanted was a campaign that could be very topical for sports fans. So I talked about how season-long players, the best part of the year is in August before the season even starts when you draft your team. And by week 2, if you're 0-2, you're SOL, your season's over, and you start to fade. Maybe you've played your biggest rival in week 1, you lost, and you don't have bragging rights against him or her until next year you don't have a chance. You can't play that person head-to-head for another year. Maybe your best player was injured, and that happened in week 1, and now your roster is sunk and you feel like the rest of the year is going to not work for you. What we did was create this method where on Sunday when NFL news happens, we took this out of the Titleist playbook for those people who know that, we create relevant advertising. So when David Johnson, who was the consensus #1 pick for season-long leagues, got injured in the first game and was going to be out for 12 weeks, by Monday morning, we had made this.
Draft a fresh lineup this week and play our free $100,000 Pick'em contest with promo code CONTAIN.
So we had a couple of those last week. We have a couple of those that are running this week. When bye weeks come up, we'll make a point. When there are injuries, we'll make a point. If there's weather situations to deal with, we'll make a point. If there's a coaching change, the point being is that you can play with a fresh lineup every week. And we're not here to say leave season long and just play DFS. It's not a no but, it's a yes and. If you love fantasy sports, season long players, you should also play daily fantasy because it gives you more ways to play, more ways to win, more ways to get closer to the games you love. So that's out there. That's really hard working. That execution works in bars, works on Facebook or other social channels where the sound isn't always up. The alt type and helps communicate a story in those environments. But we also made another campaign where we don't take sports so seriously. I mean, we take fantasy seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And we identified that there are certain maladies that take place during the course of a fantasy football season. And we have a doctor. He's a real doctor. His name, coincidentally, is Dr. Aftkings, who has identified what those maladies are. And this is a way that we're connecting with season-long fans to show that we get what goes on with them every week.
You have the lowest fantasy football winnings I've ever seen. You have earnings dysfunction. I recommend DraftKings. And if you draft the perfect lineup in the free opening weekend contest, the prize is $1 billion.
You said $1 billion?
Billion with the B. This is money.
I know what that is.
Play DraftKings free $100,000 contest week 1, and if you draft the perfect lineup, you can win $1 billion. Use promo code GAMETIME.
We have another version of that now that the $1 billion contest is over. We have to run a different version, and the doctor does the thing because you can win a lot of money at DraftKings. And the guy goes, "What kind of fantasy doctor are you?" He goes, "What kind of doctor are you?" He goes, "I'm a fantasy doctor." Nothing weird, though. I'm not into any of that weird stuff. So look out for that. That's on the air this week. Here's another one about the ability to draft every week.
What's the verdict, Dr. Aftkings?
Blood work says it's draftitis. Just when your fantasy football draft is finished, you become depressed. All you want to do is keep drafting.
What can I do?
DraftKings. It's quick and easy to draft a new team every week.
Just play this and I'm cured?
No. You've got gout.
counts.
But I can keep drafting, right?
Oh, yeah, you can keep drafting. I got the gout. You got the gout.
Play DraftKings free $100,000 contest week 1, and if you draft the perfect lineup, you can win $1 billion.
Walking down the hall the other day, I got off the elevator, and somebody I don't even know who works at DraftKings looks at me and goes, "You got the gout." And here's another one.
Call a doctor!
Hey, I'm Dr. Afking. What's up?
He's been distraught ever since his friend smoked him last week in fantasy football. Now he's grabbed this post and he won't respond.
He's got Luzonic plague.
What is...
He's a loser.
He's not a loser. Okay, he's a loser. What can he do?
With DraftKings, he could have easily challenged his friend to a rematch.
Okay, I can't. What are you doing? I can't see that.
You need glasses. I'm also an optometrist.
At DraftKings, you can play free private contests whenever you want.
So Dr. DraftKings has taken off pretty well. It was named a couple weeks ago Campaign of the Week by Drum, which we're really proud of. It's gotten some other creative accolades, which we feel good about because we're trying to round out our brand and be more appealing and likable. But most importantly, DraftKings is a performance-oriented company. And one thing going from agency side to client side that's been incredibly enlightening is every day, every hour, people are paying attention to the most important numbers. Before I get into these, what was cool about this campaign is for both versions, the play direction as well as Dr. DraftKings, when compared to the control, which was the best performing creative from the last 2 years, not the one I showed you before, a better spot than one I showed you earlier. Dr. DraftKings had a lift of plus 40% over the control, and play was not quite that high, but also significantly higher. Most importantly for NFL, our revenue week 1 this year, actually now this is through week 2, is up over 20% year over year. In acquisition, that's first-time depositors, these are people who have never played our games before, is up over 25% year over year, just 2 weeks into the season. So we're really proud of the results. We want to invite you to play. We have a special promo code for all you folks in the ad club. If you use promo code ADCLUB and you've never played before, you will immediately be offered a free contest entry. That doesn't expire until the end of the year, but I would encourage you to play this year so we can monetize you over the next couple of months. After we take our rake, yes. No. But that's it. I realize we're running out of time, and I'd be happy to answer whatever questions anybody have.